Hello, world. Welcome to the Vaping Unplugged podcast. Everything you need to know about vaping and tobacco harm reduction.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vaping Unplugged podcast. Everything you need to know about vaping. Welcome back, as I said, and I want to say a special welcome to our guest today, Jan Mošovský. Jan, thank you so much for being with me today. Jan works at Students for Liberty on programs. He's programs manager, right? And also is the director for research at the Prague-Based Liberalni Institute. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's been a while since we've spoken about what's going on in Czech Republic. And I know you've had quite some experience with researching about THR, and you have all this knowledge that I think would be very useful for our audience to hear as well. So as I said, Jan, thank you so much for being with us, and let's just jump in and maybe you tell us a little bit about situation, which is like THR wise, what's been going on in Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for the intro, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So yes, we worked in the past on a few projects. We were especially focused on comparing the situation THR wise in the Czech Republic and in other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And Czech Republic kept coming up ahead in terms of the level of harm reduction applied in both the regulation and the tax policy applied to nicotine products. But and the trend has been looking mostly positive for the past several years. The government that got elected 3 years ago actually had in its program statement when it formed that they do want to focus more on applying harm reduction principles and regulation and taxation proportional to harm in their approach to addictive substances. Besides that, the sort of venturing out of the nicotine product sphere, the government also had the ambition to legalize recreational cannabis at some level. And then, however, the government faced some challenges in putting those principles and those premises into practice. So I'm sure we will be discussing that, what actually ended up happening. And now going forward, the situation actually seems to be somewhat less optimistic because there is a big chance that this government will not be re-elected, and that instead there would be a much more conservative or populist government in place. And typically, the voters of populist government are much more likely to be smokers. So what we might expect is actually maybe not strict regulation on smoking, but probably also not more harm reduction being applied, and people not really being incentivized to switch to less harmful products. And on that note, recent negative development was that a very positive figure in the Czech harm reduction policy, Jindřich Vobořil, who was the government's advisor on drugs-related issues, who always pushed for more harm reduction and managed to get a lot of the positive proposals or positive changes that we will be discussing about passed. Was recently removed from the role, partly on the pressure of the more conservative groups. So that also is a negative signal about the government following up on its promises in that area in the one more year that it has left.
As is usually the case, as I understand from basically what we see, especially all around Europe. But you mentioned that there was a difference between what was actually in plan and what ended up happening. So maybe you can briefly describe what actually happened and what's the current regulation-wise, and let's talk about all the harm reduction or alternative products.
Mm-hmm, of course. So let me start first with the positives, though. So some of the positives were that one of the biggest debates, I think, in the sphere of harm reduction, at least in the Czech Republic, but I assume elsewhere in Europe as well, in the past few years were nicotine pouches as the newest product. In some countries, maybe more so than in Czech Republic. For example, in Poland, there was the usual moral panic of young people using this new product, and some maybe not all that true information about the degree of the problem was going around. And I would say that the Czech government actually responded with a very reasonable response to that, with a regulation that was passed or that came into effect last July. So it's been a year since the regulation came into effect, and it basically implements very general minimalist regulation on this new product. So it bans with strict fines underage usage, or more specifically sales to underage customers. Then there is some limited sales regulation or point of sale regulation and packaging regulation. There needs to be a warning notice on 30% of the product. There is some content regulation. So the content regulation is the level of nicotine per pouch, as well as the number of pouches in a package. But overall, the regulation was not overly restrictive and managed to quell the biggest concerns, which is always the increase in underage usage, and therefore the concerns about this new product becoming the feared gateway into other products and smoking. So I would say that has been one of the successes. Similar regulation was also later on, or very shortly afterwards, introduced in Slovakia. So I would say these have been some of the things that the government managed well. However, as part of, and curiously, this actually was not necessarily part of maybe intentional harm reduction or addiction policies, but it came about as part of more austerity fiscal package, was revision of the tax policy, and that introduced excise taxes on some products that didn't have them before, including nicotine pouches, but it also was a significant increase on taxes on electronic cigarettes. And that
so pouches had no taxes before and was introduced then?
Yes,
that's what you meant. Okay.
Yes, and the increase was quite steep. So I think if it passed as it was initially proposed, that would double the price of pouches. That would not really make them efficient as a possible cessation product. I think that was like the tax would lead to like 120% increase in price. In the end, that proposal did not end up passing, but what ended up passing was sort of smaller tax increase. So the tax was still implemented. I think it is now 0.4 crowns per gram. It will take me a while to recalculate it into euros. It is not a high tax, but the thing is that it will increase by that amount every year until it reaches the initially intended amount. So there will not be the very large sudden spike in the price, but the price will continue growing over the course of the next several years until it eventually, in smaller increments, reaches the tax that was initially proposed. Maybe that will, the incremental changes will make it less difficult to customers. Also, because it is expressed in nominal terms, maybe inflation will eat up some of the real value of the tax. But the original proposal was made less severe, but we will eventually get to the intended tax level.
Okay, understood. That's a lot. And of course, we see that happening in a lot of places here in Georgia as well, and so many countries, that taxes is one of the ways to attack alternative products, alternative nicotine products, or tobacco, or just cessation, which is the tax is being used, is just increases price, maybe even tenfold in some cases. But what's the consumer's perspective like? Do you see, or has there been an answer on that, or what would you say? Are there consumer advocates working on this, or generally what's the mindset, or what's happening in that regards?
Mm-hmm. I think to a large degree, the fact that the tax was eventually changed, or the tax increase was eventually changed into the gradual increase rather than the one-off big increase, was largely to the action of the expert public, including the National Drug Policy Coordinator that I mentioned beforehand. And I think that managed to convince the policymakers at that point that that would actually have adverse effects. In general, I would say that one of the biggest problems in terms of the public perception is lack of information. I don't think we have specific data for Czech Republic, but overall from EU data, we know that many people believe that at the very least, e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products don't help people stop smoking, or they believe that they are about on the same level of harm or worse. So I think one of the biggest challenges is the misinformation or lack of information, and some challenges in doing the right educational campaign. One of the latest projects that we worked on was a study where we looked into how people react differently when presented with different evidence. So we had a visualization of a pack of cigarette that had the standard warning: this product can cause this and that health issues, as opposed to how people respond when there is a graphic comparing the harm of cigarettes, for example, to e-cigarettes. And we of course found that, we don't have the finding published yet, but from the initial results, we saw that people at the very least spend more time examining the comparison graphics, and on average they seem to be more convinced by the comparison graphics rather than the absolute graphics, which is in our opinion what the goal of the policy, or at least partial goal of addiction policy or harm reduction policy should be, to at least make people switch to less harmful products, as maybe the first step towards quitting.
Definitely, I completely agree on that. We're advocating for smart regulations. That means that people should be given a choice, but they should make an informed choice, of course. Which is something that we've also met in most of the countries worldwide, that there are myths and misperceptions, misconceptions about especially vaping, as we've been working about it, vaping and e-cigarettes, and there are some myths that are probably globally believed that still needs it's a ongoing work. I think that we need to continue to spend our time and resources on to debunk these myths, because it's where it comes from, it might not be as relevant as just how much people believe in it. It's a percentage of people actually believing in those. So I completely agree in that regards. And we also see, this is one of the things that is happening also in Europe, other countries as well, but if we focus on Europe, where flavors are being attacked, vaping, they couldn't, regulation wise, I don't think that EU can come in and regulate vaping completely. So that's the approach that has been found, that okay, if we ban flavors, maybe this will change. So is that similar to in Czech Republic as well? Are the flavors topic for discussion, or flavors being attacked as well? Or would you say it's something to expect in the future?
That is not something that I think we've really seen in that regard, or actually in most regards. Czech Republic tends to stick with the EU regulation on these things. So we do have, of course, the flavor ban for cigarettes, as is in the TPD. And we will see what the next version of TPD brings, because there's been discussion on the European level about flavor restrictions for alternative products, but but Czech Republic hasn't really gone further in that area. And one more thing, by the way, that I also remembered, going back to the topic of information. Another study that we did was a poll of experts, meaning addiction specialists in the Czech Republic and medical doctors and researchers from both the medical and psychological side of addiction, but also economists who deal with the more with other aspects of addictions. And we polled them on several questions, including the relative risk and effectiveness of various measures. And why I'm coming back to that on the topic of information is that one of the questions we asked them was to evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 was the optimal score, how informed they think the Czech public is on the relative harms of cigarettes and alternative products. We specifically asked, we didn't specifically ask about any specific products, just alternative products in general, and score was lower than 2.3. So even the experts on the scale to 1 to 5. So even the experts actually think that the Czech public is quite uneducated on the topic of the harmfulness of each of the products.
It's very, very sad to hear, an unfortunate reality in most of the places that we see. Do you have like the statistics or data on that as well? What's the percentage like of people in Czech Republic, smokers versus electronic cigarette users, or alternative products, or like smokers who were able to quit through anything else? Do you have that kind of data as well?
I don't have the data on quitting. However, we do have the data on usage. So in terms of smoking, Czech Republic is above the EU average, as are most of the Eastern European countries. So we are just somewhere under 30% of smoking prevalence. In terms of alternative product usage, we have quite a lot of people who try different products, fewer people who are regular users. So we have just under 20% of people who tried or have some experience with vaping, around 15% of people who tried heated tobacco products, and around 6% of people who tried pouches. In terms of people who use them regularly, the latest data that we have from the Czech report on addiction is that around 2% of people use pouches, and 1/3 of that, so just under 1% of people use them on a daily basis. However, so that might not seem like much, but what I see as positive is that maybe while smoking prevalence, meaning people who use cigarettes with some regularity, is not going down that fast, what is going down much faster is the number of cigarettes that are sold and smoked by Czechs. So what that might mean, that while maybe nearly as many people continue to smoke, they smoke at lower frequency. They smoke fewer cigarettes because maybe they use dually with other product as well. So even that I think is a not as great trend as we would like to see, but it's still a positive trend.
It is, and that would mean that even though the smokers rate is not decreasing, the consumption is, which would mean that the consumers are actually showing in that regard that they do prefer to have alternatives as well. Maybe not only those, but to have options, to have choices, right? So definitely on that for sure. Is that something that you would say also happens? You mentioned experts and maybe psychological field, medical workers, whatever it may be, experts. Do you think that is something that is happening, that experts are recommending alternatives for if people are like, oh, I want to quit smoking, and that's being done in a medical sense as well?
That I am not 100% sure, because I know that in the UK, for example, e-cigarettes
Yeah.
are recognized by the healthcare system to be recommended product for cessation. I actually am not sure about the legality of actual doctor, general practitioner recommending people to try vaping. I'm not sure if that's something that doctors can do.
No, I was asking if there's like a standard for them to recommend something or a way to quit smoking, because UK always comes as a good example in that regards. But even we were talking about the other day in Georgia, there is on a pack of cigarettes, there's like a phone number for hotline that you can call if you want to. It says that you want to quit smoking, call the hotline number, and the hotline number doesn't work. So there is no work. No, I don't think anyone is paying as much attention or working in that field as to recommend or help people how to quit smoking, right? So I was asking if there is something going on in Czech Republic that in that regards.
So some of the experts we actually consulted for the survey I mentioned earlier are involved in working in clinics that help people stop smoking, but I actually don't have the internal details of what products they recommend or what methods they recommend to quit smoking.
But it's still very good to hear that they're working on that. Awesome. Some other findings, maybe you can share a little bit where's the most, because the research that you did, it was quite extensive. So maybe to sum it up quickly, or what was the most interesting or most unexpected parts for you that were discovered in all of that?
I think some of the findings that I found very interesting were mostly related to actually other countries, not really Czech Republic. So one of the papers that we wrote, and that's a while ago, that's 2021, 22. So 2022. So that's not completely up to date anymore, since many changes happened since. But we prepared a harm reduction index that analyzed different Central European countries that on various indicators of harm reduction policy that included the policy towards smoking and alternative products, as well as information campaigns that are available and so on. And I was actually very surprised, despite the fact that the Czech Republic typically follows the way of just implementing what the EU directives contain. It still came up pretty much on the top. The Czech Republic came up second, just after Austria, in the Central and Eastern European comparison. So I was very much surprised that despite the little that we do policy-wise, it is still enough to actually land us very much the first places in the region, and that it could all be much worse.
Definitely. And again, UK is always a good example in that. It can be like in UK, I think people, even consumers, were like felt very safe in that regards, and then boom, immediately that changed very quickly. So it might be worse, it might get even worse. So yes, definitely good job on that. I think in that regards, like following the TBD, like general regulation wise, that's understandable and that's workable, at least for us. We see it like, okay, that is still something that we can work with, but there are a lot of countries that add on top of that and very strict and heavy regulations. So I think I do agree Czech Republic is doing relatively well in that regards. So anything else you wanted to add about the findings, or I do have a few more questions?
I think we can move on, and maybe something still comes to mind.
Awesome. What do you think future looks like? You mentioned some political changes as well. So maybe in your own opinion, what's going to happen? What do you see changing, and in which direction?
So we have our next general election in a year, which is still a long time, and many things can happen in 1 year. But I think, especially since I mentioned the government, starting with the program statement that basically said harm reduction, not that much was achieved as there could have. Also, the Czech Republic had EU presidency at the EU Council presidency during the time of this government, so there could have been potential to open up some discussions or maybe about harm reduction on the European level. Part of the way we tried to address the topic was through the optics of mental health, because that is something that is discussed in the EU a lot and also here on the national level. So one way we tried to frame the discussion was that addictions, including nicotine addictions, are an important aspect of mental health, and they therefore addressing them in a sensible way should be under the umbrella of this discussion, this broader conversation. But despite that, I think there was a potential to achieve more. And looking into the future, we will see what government we end up with in a year, but the fear is that we might end up with a nationalist populist government, and which is usually voted for by non-city workers. Not non-city inhabitants, who typically tend to have higher smoking rates than people who live in the capital and so on. So the expectation from my end would be that the next government potentially would be less friendly towards harm reduction, and possibly in favor of keeping the status quo, or maybe even introducing stricter regulation on harm reduction products, because their voters are not the ones who that often use them. So they might see that as a potential tax revenue, but we will see how that all ends up going.
It's unfortunate for sure, but that means definitely more work for us.
Definitely.
And we will definitely keep fighting for consumers' rights. Anything in the works for you in this regard? Will you be continuing your work with THR, or some projects to look forward ahead that you're planning?
So the project that I mentioned before, where we collected data and we're trying to see how people respond. So it was how people respond to different forms of the warning labels and different forms of campaigns should be published over the course of the summer, in the next few months. And besides that, of course, we will continue looking at what's happening on the EU level, and we will definitely continue looking at what that also means for the Czech Republic. One of the big topics for us has been, especially since the discussion about nicotine pouches opened up, has been the comparison with the Nordic countries. As a sort of example of how successful harm reduction policy can look like. So I think this is also a conversation that we will continue having.
That's very good to hear. We also work with there's this organization called Considered Pouches that does great work about pouches and in general. But we also had a running campaign that was called "Quit Smoking Like the Swedes," because it's one of the best examples, definitely Sweden, to bring up when we talk about harm reduction and moving away from smoking and the smallest percentage of smallest smokers rate. So that's definitely good to hear, and good luck. I think the work you do is very, very important. And I'm sure we'll talk more in the future once you have more projects and all the work is done and is published. It will be definitely interesting for me personally as well to hear more about that. So we will definitely chat more on that. I think our audience will also be very interested to hear and see the upcoming changes, especially once the election is over, as you mentioned, and we'll see what kind of changes that will be in place. In the meantime, we are running Every Life Counts campaign. It's a petition that we launched because of as EU prepares to review the Tobacco Products Directive, there's a concern that there will be restricting safer nicotine alternatives, which is further endangering lives, of course. So we launched a petition. We will add the link to the petition, but you can go on our website as well, or all the social media accounts, and check it out. Sign the petition. Everyone who is in EU can sign a petition. We're just basically demanding for the protection of the harm reduction products. And at the end of the year, we will submit this petition to the EU Parliament's Petty Committee. So hopefully this will gain the attention that we are bringing consumers' voices. We have almost 70,000 signatures right now from all across Europe, but we'll definitely get more till the end of the year. So we'll see. Again, this is an ongoing work for us as well. So our audience, as well as a reminder to check out our website and social media to see our campaigns. And again, Jan, thank you so much for being with me today. I think it was very, very interesting to hear your work and more about Czech Republic. Definitely good luck with more of your work, and I hope to chat with you soon again.
Thank you for having me, and also good luck with all your future projects.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.